Hello, Stacy.
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you yet.
You know what? I have a camera. I didn't realize it would look like this. So let me just hook up my camera. Just give me a second here.
Yeah, of course. Take your time.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, it didn't. How am I going to do this? Camera. Allow. Here we go. Hope this works. It's working.
The photo disappeared.
Hello.
There you are.
Hi. Oh my gosh, it's not. Oh, this is not. It's an external camera not wanting to hook up to me. There we go. Okay. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, not working. Oh my gosh. I just don't understand why it won't. There we go.
There you
Hello.
go. There. Nice.
I can't believe I'm the only one here. I'm going to do this.
Yeah, there's been a break in the action, so it might take a little while for everybody to get back up to speed again. We used to do this weekly, and we've been messing with the schedule, and it wouldn't surprise me that everybody's a little kind of confused by it. But oftentimes they'll trickle in throughout the first half hour too. But anyway, it's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you as well. I think this is very fortuitous. I think we might have a friend in common. Do you know Anita Ayers?
What was the last name? It broke up a bit.
Anita Ayers. She's a director.
Okay. It's not immediately coming to mind. I'm sorry if I have met her, but it's not ringing a bell yet. What has she worked on?
She works on episodes of Mayday right now. She has done. She did a movie, a Nazi movie. It looked really amazing, but I'm not sure it got picked up. I think she did the proof of concept. I wish I could remember the story. She told me how she met you, because then maybe that would trigger your memory. I think you've maybe encountered each other a couple of times. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask her again. I was telling her about this writers group and how wonderful it is, and I told her that one of the three partners just won all these awards for Mr. Dress Up. Congratulations, that's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
And she asked, what's his name? And so I told her, and she said, oh, I think I might know him. So she said, ask him. Maybe it's not the right Jordan Morris.
No, well, if she's associating me with the dress up thing, then she has to know which Jordan Morris it is. I mean, there's a couple in the industry. Yeah, that's why I use my middle name for IMDb, because there's a couple of us. But I'm very disappointed that I can't place her name, but I'm not that good at that kind of thing unless I've had a real personal kind of one-on-one talk like we're having right now. If we met each other at a festival or something like that, then I might not recall that, but I'd love to know, and I'd love to remember that if you can figure that out.
Sure. I think she said it was at a function. I just can't remember the function, but yeah, I'll ask her.
Yeah, that'd be great.
She remembers you.
Well, I'm embarrassed that I can't recall that, unfortunately, but I'm pretty infamous for that kind of thing. But hello, Gary. Hello, Eileen. Thanks for joining us as well.
Hey.
And so, Stacy, you're relatively new to the group. Here comes Maureen.
Hello.
Maureen, are you on a beach somewhere?
I am.
Okay. So we can hear the waves crashing in the background.
But I'm going to mute myself so that doesn't sound so loud.
Okay. Well, I'm going to interact just with Stacy for a minute, because she's new and she and I haven't interacted before. But yeah, Stacy, was it just a matter of coming here to hang out and say hi, or did you have something you'd like to talk about?
It was just to come here and say hi and hang out and see what happens.
Well, it's pretty loose.
What happened? There's a huge spider on the wall. Oh, sorry. I'm not muted. I'm sorry. My daughter just encountered a giant spider. So outside.
I see. Yeah, the office hours are pretty, unstructured, pretty loose. Everybody just shows up when they like and brings up whatever subject they want to talk about. If there's a particular problem with your project or something that you're finding stubborn, then I'm happy to talk about that with you or give whatever advice I can. But if it's just a matter of hanging out with us, then I'm glad that you signed on. It's nice to have met you. But if anything comes up while we're chatting over the next, almost an hour, then just chime in. Eileen, what's going on in your world?
Hey, I'm post-squatter and dealing with construction, so I'm gonna have to be like driving around. So I'm not. That's why don't want you to watch me.
That's okay.
But good. So I loved. I guess we're going to talk tomorrow about the Brock interview he did yesterday.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting to me because the whole death thing, because the two scripts I'm trying to get right now as polished as I can. One's the murder, the serial killer one, which, go ahead and guess, involves death. And then the other one's a comedy, The Wrinkles, which is a woman dealing with, starts off with a woman whose husband's just passed away. And so that was all kind of interesting because about setting the tone, right? Because did you see the interview?
I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but I've watched parts of it, and I found that observation of his really, really interesting myself. Because tone is a tricky thing to talk about, and I haven't come across too many tools that really illustrate how to get a handle on tone. There's a couple of musical kind of references and metaphors that tone is, when you talk about it in terms of music, it sometimes get a little easier to understand and to talk about and implement in their work. But I liked this because there's basically only two motivators. From a different observation, a different subject, someone had said to me, and it stuck with me, that there's only two motivators, and that's death or love.
Yeah, right.
So you're almost life and death there. And it made sense to me, and I enjoyed that. So I'm looking forward to listening to that interview as well. What did you come away with? And did it kind of register with you and what you're doing with your work?
Well, yeah, because my history is I was an actress for 113 years. And I do look good for as old as I am. 150. But I started acting as a young kid. I started acting at like 4. So I grew up with learning about characters, right? And people and with observing people and always found it fascinating. Eventually I found my way into writing, although I was always writing, but never took it seriously. So one of the things where he was saying how, I forget who it was. One of the actors was saying that you want me to play his best friend dies. I can't remember if it was
Robert Downey Jr.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. And then, he wants me to go, then I'm supposed to go on and do all this other stuff, but I'm going to be thinking about how my best friend just died. Like, right. I thought that was really like, yeah, that actor, because that is what an actor would be thinking. It's love and death, like you were just saying. It's like, so you don't just skip over death, right?
The risk is that if you do that, then it has no impact, and it was pointless in throwing the character away. If you can't use it to help reshape the character that remains their point of view, like if it's not part of their trajectory as their character arc, then why bother doing it? It just sounds like a stunt that's just hollow. So that's an excellent actor, obviously giving the writer's notes on that type of thing.
Well, yeah, because that's the actor is going to be, it goes back to tone too, right?
Yeah.
so the tone, if someone, and so, when I wrote Wrinkles, and the woman, there's actually about 3 characters, but her husband passes away in the first, 10 minutes of the screenplay, but it's a comedy. And I was like, okay, but when they first meet, I hope I don't offend anybody. But you can't see me. So when they first meet, it's in the 70s. She's a Playboy bunny and she's out with her friends, at a party. Like, the velvet rope lifts and she first meets her husband and he comes up to her and honks her boobs and she grabs his dick.
All right.
So it's like game, set, match, I think is how I have it said. So then now we're back to, now we're in current time and he's dying. And as he's dying, he's, he has this brief moment where he comes to and he honks her boobs. And then he dies. And I'm like, okay, but I think that works, right? Like that's the tone is he's dying, but there's still the humor there. And she's laughing and crying. And so's the nurse. And then I did have to add something along the way because then she goes up to Vegas. But it was like just kind of checking to see that, because how you portray death, yeah, right. That's the whole tone. If it's a serious thing, then yeah, it's a whole other, like the serial killers, people are dying, but it's serious. So there's very little humor.
Yeah. So the
tone is clear.
Yeah. And just one more note on Robert, like many writers would not have an actor like Robert Downey Jr. there to give them that kind of pushback and feedback, and that would just carry on. They would have done what they had planned on doing. The actor would have just happily performed it, not really kind of made that very useful insight, which made the project better, obviously.
The contribution was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Observation.
So the tone and genre are not the same thing, obviously, but they're very closely tied together. So there's tonal shifts within genres, but then sometimes the genre can kind of determine what the tone is too, at least to a certain degree. So there's a few ways to tackle that kind of thing. And it's best, I think, in my opinion, to think about it from the position of the audience. So what are you asking them to go through, and what do you expect them to feel when they experience that kind of thing? And then you can maybe experiment with where you would place it, because they've just met these people. And clearly the loss of her husband should have a pretty significant effect on her. So that's going to be something that the audience sees and registers in here, the loss of her partner.
Yeah, yeah.
So would that bring the audience down? And are they going to be able to recover quickly enough to enjoy the story? Like if that's a downer moment, then that would worry some people about placing that early on. Because if you think about it, there's versions of your story that would cut to the day after or the month after or 6 months after the loss of her husband, and we'd pick up on kind of a lonely scene of her living alone, and we'd see visual motifs and other clues suggesting that she had a partner but no longer does. And that's where the story would begin, and maybe we'd litter some flashbacks throughout it and put the heavier stuff further on in the narrative, where the audience is already bought in and they're kind of anchored to the story and they can weather it without getting uncomfortable or checking out. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's all a matter of what would be the most satisfying experience for the audience, and how much can they handle early on in the story, or is the choice creating some risk for you that they'll check out on you?
Well, I think I did the exact opposite of what you were just saying, but I think I was, because it's an adventure comedy, and there's a pause between her husband dying and then the funeral, and then it turns out that the church she got married in Vegas is about to be torn down. So she wants to go to Vegas to get some sort of relic memory, since she's got a week before, a few days before the funeral. And so her girlfriends, her ex Playboy bunny friends, go with her. And so, yeah, so I do go back to her mourning, but she's also a very boisterous character,
Mm-hmm.
larger than life kind of person, you know. And when you're 130 years old, you've known a few of them, and they stand out even long after they're dead, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
to you, you know. And so she does go through pretty much the opposite of what you would ever think, but she's definitely still respectful to her husband. And you know, she ends up getting there when they're tearing the church down and it's dust, and she's, you know, upset. And but she finds there's a shiny object, and she finds it's a gold candlestick from the chapel. So she grabs that and she carries that through the whole rest of the screenplay.
Nice.
As a symbol of her husband, right? Like, but yeah, I think it works. I mean, I've gotten really good feedback. Not initially, I had to tweak it a lot, right?
Well, sure. Yeah, we all have to do that. Yeah. As long as you're getting feedback from people that say that they're enjoying it and that's not an issue, then that suggests that you struck the right tone and it's going to work. That's the only thing. I'm not trying to talk you out of it by any means, not at all.
No. But it's tricky, right? It's like that whole. It's like I think I posted something when we were on Slack, and you responded to it. It's. I have a lot of friends that are singers, songwriters, or a few that are very, very successful. And I finally kind of put it together that writing a screenplay is like writing a song, except for like you want to like the tone in a song, right? Like you can't mix it up, you know?
Yeah, the parallels with music are very, very strong. That's my favorite comparison for when I'm talking about tone with people, is to compare it with writing a song.
Right.
Yeah.
And you want to get to the emotions quickly. You want to get in there, and you want to, you know, and obviously have people know what the song's about quickly, and have them, you know, relate or be touched by it.
Yeah. Just like music, you can't jump genres. Well, for the most part, there's always exceptions, of course, but for the most part, you can't jump genres or tone because it's not pleasing to the ear. You know, it's too disruptive on the audience. They don't enjoy it. It's kind of an abrasive thing when you jump from one genre to another, or even if you switch or you choose the wrong instrument to even tell your musical story, so to speak, that can be problematic too. Everything's got to work together. So if you're getting the kind of positive feedback that you're telling me, then it's good. I mean, if you think about it, Up was devastating, right? Those first 5 minutes or whatever it was, the introduction to the Pixar movie Up was absolutely devastating. And there was some concern about whether or not that was too hard on the audience too early. But it ended up having a beautiful effect on setting up the audience for the finale, for the resolution of the story, because that was now in the back of their mind as Carl went through his story, his adventure during the narrative of that film. But that was tough because everybody was crying in the audience at the beginning of that thing.
But that's the balance. So the end of my screenplay, and I passed this or asked Brooks about it. Do you know what a hukka is?
I don't think so.
It's New Zealand natives do a hukka.
No.
And it's basically to purge emotions, to they believe that every part of your body. So there's like their football team, they before a game, they all come out and they pound their feet, and they pound their chest, and they stick their tongues out, and they just get all this emotion out. And it can be very scary if you're about to go into war with them, right?
Sure.
Whether you're on a football team or actual war. And so I have that at the end of the screenplay, that her husband's from New Zealand and he wants her to do a hukka at his funeral. And so at the end of the screenplay, I have her doing that. And it's very emotional.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's also very, you know, purging, and it does balance, I think, because when you were talking about Up, I was like, yeah, but the balance is there though, right?
Yeah. Let's face it, this is tricky. This is not easy. And the more moving you want your story to be, the riskier it gets, right? The bigger risks that you've got to take in your work to be able to elicit that kind of an emotional response. If you're conservative, then nobody cares. Nobody responds to it. Nobody feels anything when they read your work or watch the movie or TV show, whatever it is. So you've got to be bold in your choices as to how deeply you can try to resonate with your audience. So you can't be subtle, but if you go too far, if you go even 1 inch too far, they'll check out. If you make it too uncomfortable, then they're gone. So the refinement is a big deal, right? You lay out your ideas, you get your feedback, you do your treatment, you do your beat sheet, all that kind of stuff. Then you make your first draft, and it's a muddy mess, of course, it always is. That's to be expected. But at that point, then you start refining all of these ideas. You should have figured out at that point whether or not the basic fundamentals of your story work. And if you've gotten the kind of feedback that everybody here suggests you need, and everybody was on board, your readers were on board, everybody thought it was good, then you get down to the refinement of it. You just make it work really, really well, and for more people. So refinement and distillation of ideas that's where most of the work is. Getting to the first draft. A lot of people think the first draft is like near the finish line. It's not. It's way closer to the starting line than the finish line. There's a lot.
I say as soon as I write my first the end, I know it's really just the beginning. You know?
Yeah. Now you've got, and someone else put it nicely, now you've got that big slab of marble in the artist's studio. Now you can go to work. It was a lot of effort to get that big slab of marble in that studio. Yes, but you're just getting started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
that sounds really cool.
That gives you freedom. I remember reading, I think people call it the vomit draft, but I think it was Hemingway who called it the shitty first draft.
Yeah. Draft, that's his quote. I've got that pinned up in my office here. The first draft of everything is shit. That's Hemingway. Yeah.
And that to me, that was freedom for me, right? Because then it was like, oh, wait, then I have no pressure.
No.
I can write shit.
Yeah, you should. That's the first thing that I do when I talk to, like, especially younger writers who haven't done this very much, is that's to be expected. So don't be afraid of that. Know that it's coming. Know that first draft that you write is going to be absolute garbage. You're going to feel really bad about it. If you put it aside and come back a week or a month later, whatever it is, you're going to be horrified by what you read. But that's normal. That's absolutely normal. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong, actually. It just means that you're going to have to get started and kind of fix things. But only if you've done that kind of early work too. Like you've done the developmental phases. You've tested things out as 1 sentence, 5 sentences, 15, whatever your process is. And if you've got positive feedback all the way through, then the bones are good. But that first draft is never going to be good. Even if you did a ton of developmental work, your first draft is still going to be garbage for 99% of us. Very few people can knock out a really polished first draft. We leave that to like the mutants of the art world, like Stephen King. Maybe his first draft is pretty solid, but for the rest of us, it's an awful mess that we've got to kind of sew up and clean up. But yeah, it should be. I love hearing that you think that it's liberating to know that going in, because most people are afraid of their first draft. They put too much pressure on it to be perfect, or when they read it, they think it's garbage and they throw it away. And both are kind of wrong in my estimation. It doesn't have to be perfect and shouldn't be and never will be anyway, because nobody's ever written a perfect script. But it's to be expected that it's garbage and it's just early stages. So now you roll up your sleeves and you put on a different hat as the editor and you go to work and just refine everything. That's perfectly normal.
Yeah. And eventually you start looking back at it going, I wrote that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's all a process. It's all an absolute process. And eventually you get to the point where you can't add anything more to it. So then you have to bring in more people. You have to start sharing it with other people or something like that. But yeah, so a screenplay is never really finished either. So people who try to put a nice tidy bow on the end of it are probably wasting their time as well. Just know that you've done all you can with it, and now it's time to bring in other people, either to sell it, try to get it to a producer, whatever, or bring in a writing partner if you're really frustrated with it, whatever it might be. But they're never perfect and they're never done. They're just done with you, or you're done with it, but that's about it.
Right.
Yeah. So is there anything in particular I can do for you today?
No, that was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for checking in. Okay. I can't remember who came in next, Maureen or Gary. Which of you would like to chime in next? I'd like to hear what you got going on in your part of the world.
I think Gary was here before me.
Okay, go, Gary. Gary, what's
Hello.
going on? Hello.
Hey, yeah, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, congratulations on your Canadian Oscars, or I think we should just call them Oscars.
Yes,
Yay, yes.
They don't have a nice, tidy nickname. one of our the comedian Norm Macdonald hosted the awards banquet one year and tried to get the nickname the Candies, in kind of a nod to John Candy, one of our, of course, most beloved actors. But apparently the organizers hated that idea and shot it down. So they're still just known as the CSAs, which is terribly boring.
Yeah, you can't really do much with that. Yeah, but yes, because I haven't quite got to the end of it, but I started watching it. It's on Amazon, and I was really enjoying it, the documentary. And yeah, because I've made my documentary, and it's a film installation about me being a carer for my mum who had Alzheimer's. So yeah, I wanted to chat to you about the process, because we're now thinking about making kind of my story like a feature-length documentary, which would include kind of stuff that we've already shot, but mostly it's about my own journey, because there's a whole history, which I can go into briefly if you want. But yeah, so just interested in how your documentary came into being. Yeah.
Yeah, we started working on it 5 years ago last week.
Right. Oh, wow.
And I mean, there was a big chunk in the middle there where we got shut down by COVID, of course, but that ended up being good for us, because if it weren't for that, we wouldn't have, we likely wouldn't have partnered with Amazon, because that was a kind of a detour we took while we were down. But essentially, the short version of the story is that the show's been off the air for decades now. It's still considered Canada's most beloved property, and yet it's disappearing. Right. We knew that nobody was preserving it. They had shot 4,000 episodes, and there's well under 1,000 left in existence now.
Oh, wow.
So as far as Canadian culture goes, we're not really great at preserving our culture. We tend to kind of defer to American culture a lot of the times, and most of our industry is Canadians making American TV shows and movies now. We don't have a theatrical release thing. You know, England and Australia are still kind of holding out. They've got theatrical releases for films, but we don't. Anyway, we were inspired by that because both my friend, the director, and I are big fans of the show, grew up with it at different stages because I'm older than he is. But because it was on the air for almost 30 years, it did resonate with several different generations of Canadians.
Wow.
So we wanted to do a story on not only the show, but on this problem of preservation as well. We thought we would tackle two things at once, and that was the earliest conversations that we had. We would do a history of the show, the history of the star of the show, his early life, how he came to get to where the show was, all the usual kind of things as far as the historical timeline goes, but then also have a difficult conversation about preservation, and that many of these seminal shows are kind of on the precipice of just disappearing completely. And we've lost a bunch already. I could rhyme out a bunch of titles that wouldn't make any sense to anybody who's not a Canadian, but we've lost a lot of shows that I grew up with as a kid completely. Like there was one network that's gone under, and all of the shows that network was responsible for are gone forever.
Right.
Some of those were quite popular and had very high profile stars at early stages in their careers. Like they were culturally significant shows. So those were the two things that we wanted to do. Was we wanted to remind everybody why they loved that show and show them the how it came to be. And then we also wanted to have this kind of conversation about preservation. And in the end, we had to actually abandon most of the conversation about preservation because the network that owns the IP was not having it. And they were very resistant to working with us and slammed the door in our face every time. This is the CBC network here in Canada.
Yeah.
They own the show, and it's their, lack of preservation that's responsible for it kind of.
Yeah.
So we were not friendly, and they were kind of, confrontational with us and very uncooperative, and they really wanted to shut us down. They wanted us to just shut up and go away. But being as we were so small that we were almost impossible to kill. Like I joke with my friend and collaborator that we're creative cockroaches because we're so small that we're very, very difficult to kill. And we brought on another big production company called Marble Media, and they they gave us a lot of support, and with their additional resources, we were able to travel all across the country and do a bunch of things and interview other people we hadn't been able to get to. So our budget went from, I don't know, probably about $85,000 when it was just the two of us, to $250,000 when Marble came on board.
Right.
And then it became a real legitimate production. But we were still going to war with CBC. Every time we wanted to get to something, their archives, permission for footage, permission for music, talking to people who still work at the CBC. All of this was very, very difficult, and they were very uncooperative. And then Marble got us during the COVID shutdown, said, would you like to pitch to Amazon? And they set that up for us. And of course we said yes.
Yeah.
We pitched, and then a couple of days after the pitch, we were told it was too Canadian, and Amazon didn't want it.
Of course, yeah.
And then I can't remember, it was a couple of weeks or a full month, but then we got a call from Amazon saying, would you like to pitch again?
Right.
And we were like, well, okay, but it's going to be the same pitch, like it hasn't changed. And they're like, well, you're going to pitch to new people. We said, oh, okay. And it turns out that the two new executives that we pitched to were both Canadian expatriates.
Right.
They understood what the show was. They understood how important it was to Canadians. So they greenlit us. And typically when you work with Amazon, you're given two lanes. The first is that Amazon controls everything. They give you the money that you need, but they have control over everything. They have all creative control. They staff your production with people they're comfortable with. Everything is there. And if you go that route, then you get the Amazon original logo on your work, and it goes right on the front landing page when it's released. The other way is that you do it all yourself. You spend all of your own money. They don't spend any money, and they don't have any expectations creatively as to what it is. And then they just buy it from you and put it in their catalog on the streaming platform at the end. But it's not an Amazon original. It's just another title.
And if they buy it, it's not on Amazon original. That's weird.
Yeah, it's just a product that they buy and resell. Like they're a reseller at that point. So they produce their own work, and then they buy and resell stuff as well.
Yeah.
And they said, we'd like to offer you a third lane. And they'd never done that before. And we were like, oh, what does this look like? And it basically was, we'll give you some money, and we want some creative control, and we will give you all of the production staff that you need. We'll be happy to pay for them. We'll give you lists of directors of photography, sound, music. We'll just give you the best in the country to choose from, and we'll pay for that. But we want to have some say in it. So whenever you get to a major intersection as far as what you're going to do next, we'd like to be consulted. And when you're done, we'll make it an Amazon original. And we talked about it, and they didn't seem scary to us. So we agreed to that deal because we wanted the Amazon original logo for sure, because we wanted the preference in their catalog on their streaming site. And in talking with them, they didn't seem scary. Other people have had really scary experiences with them, but the people we talked with didn't seem scary. So we went for that. And then our budget went from $250,000 up to $2.2 million. And then we had the resources to completely rebuild the set for this TV series that had been on the air for 30 years. And we put it in a CBC studio. And when Amazon came on board, suddenly a magical thing occurred. CBC got nervous and didn't like the idea of an American company creating a feature-length product on one of their IPs. And they opened up all their doors suddenly.
How funny. Yeah.
With one caveat, they said, we want to be able to air it on CBC television once. You can have a run of the archives. You can have the visual archives, audio, video, whatever you need. You can have access to the props and the puppets from the show. Basically do everything you want with it. You can interview the president of the CBC network. We'll make that happen too.
Yeah.
But off record, and this doesn't appear anywhere on paper, we have one demand, and that if we don't get this, we're not going to cooperate. And we're like, okay, well, what do you need? They said, you're going to present us as though we were champions of this project from the very beginning.
From the start, yeah. Of course.
So in short, I don't have very good things to say about the CBC, but when we made that deal with the devil, we couldn't get too critical about the preservation part of it, and we had to abandon a lot of that. And then we just brought in more of the historical stuff. And because of Amazon's budget, we were able to bring in a bunch of Canadian celebrities to sit in and around the set and just talk about what that show meant to them when they were kids.
Yeah.
And that gave it, I think in the end, that was the better move anyway. We wanted to be activists and warriors and talk about this problem. But what we ended up doing was we created something that was much warmer and friendlier to everybody.
Yeah.
So we can't really complain about that.
That comes across when you're watching it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll have our day in the sun about the preservation issue elsewhere with other projects.
Do they not see it as like IP, like important IP, or is it not worth them?
Nope.
It's weird, isn't it?
It's bizarre because it truly is the most beloved show in Canadian TV history, but they don't even bother to air one episode. Their excuse is that the contracts used on those old shows are too rich. Like they were never designed to be rerun. So the contracts state that every time it airs, people get X amount of money.
Okay.
And they say it would be crippling to do that.
Yeah.
Everybody that we interviewed that has anything to do with the show, writers, performers, directors, producers, all those people said, we stopped making money on that show decades ago. It's ridiculous. Just waive all that. We'll sign any document you want. We're not looking for money. Just get it out there and let the public see it. But they can't get out of their own way, and they don't want to bother. So there's not been a lot of movement on that front. They said they were digitizing their archives, and everybody seemed happy about that. But between you and I, that means they're destroying the originals, because they don't want to store the originals and have a digital library. So we're really uncomfortable with that, but there's nothing we can do about it. Anyway, there's lots going on. But the process for the story, the project was basically to just create the timeline, the history timeline, and then while we were doing the interviews, investigate these kind of side stories that we came across. And one of my favorite tricks that I learned with the director, who's a very good friend of mine, is that we would keep laying out the story and try to flesh out the story and bring in more experts to kind of talk about various parts of the history of the show. And whenever there was a gap that we felt was important to the story, but that we didn't have somebody to speak to, he would bring me in. We've done that on like 4 or 5 projects now. So at the 11th hour in the production, if we just don't have what we think we need, then he and I would write out everything and I would memorize it. And then I would go on camera and talk about it like it was just coming off the top of my head. But it was tailored exactly to the edit that we were trying to achieve. So I was kind of the ringer of that project. And when I went in to the shoot, he had given me, in this case, normally it's like a page or 2. In this case, he gave me 17 pages of historical information that I had to try to memorize and then just say off the cuff on camera. And I only got about halfway through it because it was about 3 hours of filming and my energy was just crashing. But we got all the important stuff out, and we ended up finding a couple other experts to come in and shore up the things that I wasn't able to get out. But that's why I'm in the movie. It's not because I'm an important kind of cultural, expert or anything like that. But I'm there to make sure the narrative works and to fill in any of the gaps. And the first time we actually did that, I thought that was absolutely genius. And I would recommend that to anybody trying to put together a documentary, is to make the things that you want. If you can't find it out there in the field and you can't get a good interview with somebody, they just won't say what you're looking for, or they're terrible on camera, whatever it is, then script it and then get a ringer that's a good actor that you can get on camera to do it for you. It's not like we're lying. We're not making up facts or anything like that. We just needed somebody to say it confidently. And that's where you got me.
Okay. Yeah, your sound went, so I had to rejoin. But it's been recorded, so I shall watch all of that again. Yeah, it's really interesting. And would you recommend? What was the pitch? What did the pitch look like for the documentary? Was that you going into a room and just pitching?
Yeah, it was very casual. It was not structured. It didn't involve a lot of documents. It didn't involve a pitch deck at all. It's just Rob going in there. He did all the talking. Multiple voices tend to confuse and muddy things. So he went in and just literally spoke from his heart. And he gave them the same pitch that we gave the family of the man who was the star of that show.
Right.
We met with his son and daughter very, very early on. And
Yeah.
if we didn't have their support, then we weren't going to proceed.
Yeah.
And in one conversation, they believed us and they put their faith behind us and they signed off on everything that we needed from them, access to everything, photos, family stuff. And once we had them, we thought we had a pretty good chance at making it work. So we basically just said the same things that we said to them about how much the show meant to us and how much we know the show means to other people. And we know there's an audience for this thing and that it's been in demand for a long time. There's absolutely nothing available online. Like no episodes are available. And everybody's wandering around believing that somebody's there preserving it, but they're not.
Yeah.
So that worked. But it was very casual.
Yeah, cool. It's really inspiring to hear that whole thing. Because it's like I heard this a while ago. It's like a no is sometimes just a no, not right now. Because the no turned into a yes.
Yeah.
At some point, for you from Amazon. So and it was the same company as well. So were they Canadian? They were Canadian. Was that Canadian part of Amazon, or was that still American Amazon?
It's American Amazon, but the two people down there in development were former Canadians.
Yeah. Okay.
And I guess they had heard that the pitch happened and wanted to take a look at it. And they had something to do with inviting us to come back around the second time. But that was very lucky. Very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Because
lucky and or fate.
Yeah. Certainly there was a ton of support for this project because it was Mr. Dress Up. We're not dummies. We know that. We'd love to think that, this was all because of me and my hard work and everything like that. But a lot of it's got to do with how much love the property has.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we just didn't screw it up. But it carried much of it. And as soon as people up here see an image of Mr. Dress Up, they tend to warm up and start talking. So we had no trouble getting people willing to be part of it for interviews or just pointing us in the direction of somebody else that had something to do with it. So there was a ton of cooperation everywhere except the CBC.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so did you have like a script for the documentary, or was that like an outline?
It was more of an outline, and the script was kind of it was more of a living cut of the movie.
Okay.
We scripted out an outline and then talked it out and then cut it. But there wasn't ever a kind of really formalized full script of it. It doesn't work that way. Like for documentaries, they evolve. When you go to camera with a narrative, you know exactly what you're getting, right? You've got the blueprint for it in your hands. When you go to camera for a documentary, in my opinion, you're hunting for the story. And the story doesn't appear entirely until very close to the end of the process.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I'll let someone else take over. But that's really interesting to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. My pleasure. And if you've ever got any other questions about that kind of stuff, just shoot me with a DM or anything like that. I'm happy to.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Hi, Pat. I haven't said hi to you.
Hello.
Okay, Maureen, you were up next. What's going on in your corner of the world, or I guess on the beach with you there?
Thank you. Well, I'm back at home now.
Okay.
So let's see. I want to quick things. I think what happens is when you go, at least every time I went into the comment section, I couldn't hear anymore and I had to rejoin. So seems maybe it's a little glitch with the system.
That's weird.
Second, I just want to make a quick comment about the documentary stuff, and then I want to talk about my other project. But
sure.
When I first met Brooks, one of the projects that I have on my back burner is a documentary about all this family secrets that I've found through Ancestry and finding a sister that was given up for adoption, and then my mom's birth family, yada, yada.
Cool.
And I remember Brooks telling me, like, that's kind of a labor of love, not exactly something that would probably launch your career. And so what I was just noticing about your documentary is obviously the subject matter is something universally loved in your whole country.
Yep.
So obviously that makes it a lot more compelling.
Yep.
Than, a personal documentary, which those can be beautiful and wonderful. But I was just making that observation.
Well, it's funny you say that because the second documentary that I made with Rob McCallum, my friend, the director, And in this case, I co-directed it. Yeah, that's right. I've got a co-directing credit for one called Missing Mom. So that was his second feature, and it was all about how his mom had gone missing, basically disappeared almost overnight 25 years earlier. And there was all kinds of confusing stories in his family tree about what could have happened, what did happen, her story. Like everybody had a different version of who this woman was and what happened, which was fascinating. And he just woke up one morning and said, I think I'm going to do a documentary on my mom, and I'm going to see if I can try to find her. And that was a really fascinating project, but it had a much smaller audience, obviously, because it's not a national, internationally recognized IP, but it was really satisfying. And it went on to win some awards. And we still get mail from that one regularly from people saying, this has inspired me to try to reach out to people that are missing in my family. You know, it really moved me, that kind of stuff. And I think it took us 10 days to find her, despite the fact that we went to the police. Yeah, the police said she doesn't want to be found. We're not going to help you. And yeah, it was really, really cool because we did an investigation and we found her after blanketing a town in northern Ontario where I live, where we knew she had a job at one point because we'd heard a couple stories that she'd worked there. And we covered the town with posters. Do you know this woman? And we got a bite. And we found her. And then the best part of the movie is when he cold calls her, and she doesn't know it's coming. And he freaks out. Like his emotions get the best of him, and he loses his mind for a split second there and lies to her about who he is because he's so nervous. He's not sure it's her, and she doesn't know who he is. And it's just this really tense mess. But we ended up gathering it back together, and we met her face to face, and she moved back to his hometown, my hometown, and reintegrated with the family. It was pretty
Wow. That's satisfying.
Yeah. After 25 years, it all came down to a miscommunication, and everybody assumed a wrong version of the story was true.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It's crazy.
That's cool. That sounds really cool.
So you can have success with it, and it's more manageable. You can do those on a really low budget, which we certainly did. I don't think he spent, even with legal and everything and music, I don't think he spent more than 60 or 70 grand on it. But it still performs on streaming platforms.
That's cool. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I would like to talk about my POTUS Interruptus.
Okay.
And so basically I'm in the good at get it great phase, where I've, been through some feedback and I've integrated it. And now, so basically one of the things I did to make sure that I've got the right dynamics and the right spine is that I put it into the Save the Cat, beat sheet.
Okay.
And I'm having some people look over that who say they know, the Save the Cat stuff. And just a couple things I wanted to touch on with you because like Brooke says, you go a mile deep, and some of our discussions about theme and about character arc have really made a big impact on my script. So
it's cool.
One of the things, so it's kind of, it's shifted. I've massaged it. Like you said, I'm sculpting it. And so one of the things I remember you saying is that the character has to have a goal, a tangible goal, something that can be measured that we know about. So for my POTUS character, I made it that she's planning and preparing to divorce her husband when the movie starts.
Okay.
That's why she's praying that he loses the election, because that complicates her plan to be able to divorce him. So that's something that I just added because I realized after all this time, she didn't have a clear, tangible goal when I started.
Yeah. So the divorce is her goal when she starts. And by that, I mean, this is a goal that she has in mind
Yes.
when she exits Act 1 and enters Act 2 to begin the pursuit of that goal.
Well, okay, so that's what's kind of confusing. So, okay, so maybe it can work this way. So when we go into Act 2, that's when she hires the love coach. That's when
Yeah.
she gets started with the coach. Her husband has already died by this point.
Yeah.
So, but I've changed it around. In the beginning, I had it that her goal for hiring the coach was because she wanted to be able to have a love life. But I've shifted it where she doesn't want another man in her life complicating, like telling her who she is, telling her what to do. She thinks that what she finally needs is to be independent and not have a man. And so that does go with the idea that she wanted to divorce her husband.
Okay.
But the timing is funny because she wants to divorce him, but then he dies. So that problem is solved, but then they want her to run for president. So now she's even, less free, and then she gets elected.
Yeah.
All that has happened by the time we break into 2, where she's decided to go with the coach.
Yeah. And why specifically? What's her goal with the coach?
Her goal with the coach is that, so even after she, gets elected, she didn't want to be president. She cares about the environment, and she just wanted to be free and independent and have her own life. Then they want her to run for president. She's too cowardly to say no, so she tries to sabotage it, but she gets elected anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then once elected, she has zero power because her brother-in-law is really running the show, and now she can't even have a semblance of a normal life. And she's not allowed. She wants to at least do something on the environment, and he says no. We can't do that. It conflicts with our, family business, and
Yeah.
so she has no freedom. So she sees this coach, and the coach kind of delivers this message that shoots into her soul, which is like, this is your life. This is your one life to be you, and you've got to grab it, and something along those lines. And that hits her because she's like, fuck, I don't have a life. And so that's why she, and I'm not even allowed to, I'm the president, and I'm not even allowed to stand up for the things that I really care about.
Yeah.
So that's why she hires the coach.
So what would what would it look like? I guess maybe I'll talk about a little bit about that transition into 2, because that's where what they call the main dramatic question happens.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've set up the story effectively in Act 1, then as your protagonist exits Act 1, the audience, whether they're aware of it or not, can ask this thing known as the main dramatic question, which is always a variation of will she or won't she, right? She's already articulated what her goal is, what the finish line looks like. So then as she's stepping into Act 2 and beginning the pursuit of that goal, which is going to fail at the halfway point, but we don't know that yet. She doesn't know that yet.
Mm-hmm.
She steps into Act 2 to begin that pursuit of the goal. The audience asks, I wonder if she's going to be able to do it or if she's going to fail. And they kind of lean in a little bit to kind of see what happens. So they can see the finish line because we've articulated that out in Act 1. And then they try to picture how she gets there and whether or not she's going to be able to pull it off. So they actually, it acts as a really effective glue between the audience and your story.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't give them a clear idea of what the finish line is, they tend to wander off because they don't know where it's going, because the goal is kind of nebulous.
Yeah.
You can't say, like a character can't say, I want to be successful. That's not enough. It's going to be, you know what? I'm going to make my first million and buy that mansion, that one right there. I'm going to live in that big house on the hill. That's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
That helps. Or another way, it was one of the most interesting way I've heard it articulated is that in a fantasy story, the prince doesn't say one day I'm going to be king. He says one day I'm going to wear the crown. And it's a visual.
Yeah.
And
I gotcha. Yeah. So in that case, I think I need more, because obviously if she wants a divorce, then her husband dies. So that's already out the window.
It's taken care of.
So maybe she wants a divorce because she wants to, and it's either, I don't know, that's what I need to figure out, is what is that thing she wants, that she still wants as she's president. She's hiring a coach to help her get the balls to go after this thing she wants.
Yep. And when we go through those 8 details of the protagonist in that previous lab that I did, so there's clues as to what you need in her root fear, which is her fear of
that's right.
death. And there's clues in the antidote, like the personal antidote of, okay, she's got this kind of broken belief system because of some kind of wound that she's suffered earlier on in her life. And that basically informs who she is and how she acts, what her motivations are, all that kind of stuff. And then from there, you have to figure out what the antidote is. Like, what would it take for her to be able to shed all that stuff and just live her life free and unencumbered? So in my estimation, your task is, she wants to live her own life, but that's, again, too nebulous a concept for the audience. So what does that look like manifested into something physical?
Right. Yes. And so when you talk about the antidote, is that the real antidote or the one she thinks is the antidote?
The real one. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing I call the personal antidote is the real deal. And it's basically the exact opposite of the root fear. And both, by the way, involve the word proof. I've found that to be really, really important.
Yes.
So it can't be just that she's afraid of some kind of nebulous concept. She's afraid of coming across proof that this fear of hers is actually true. And then the antidote is that she gets proof that she's not the broken person she thought she was, that she's her true self, proof that she is lovable, is capable, whatever the thing is.
Yes, you shared that with us, and that actually really impacted my arc, my trajectory. So her root, the root trauma thing is that she was kind of slut shamed by her family.
Right, I remember that. Yeah,
and then her fear is that she's disgusting, and and so, like you said, she's her broken compass tells her, to do whatever she has to do so that the proof won't be there that she's disgusting.
Yeah, so she's taking everybody else's advice on how to counteract that, but obviously they don't have her best interest in mind. So she's got to figure out how to prove her self-worth. It's going to take a lot more conversation than we're probably going to shake out here, but there's a refinement of this wound and her fear and all of these things. I think they need to get distilled a little more. And when you dial them in a little bit better, I have a feeling that all kinds of lights are going to come on and you're going to be able to see how to connect the dots. But right now it's not quite clicking.
Because that'll help me figure out what her initial goal is, what she thinks she wants.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Initially, it's got something to do with kind of putting her life back to the way it was before the inciting incident happened. That's typically the first plan, is always kind of misinformed. And she's just trying to get things back to normal, what she thinks is. And then at the midpoint, she figures out that the situation is bigger, more complicated, worse than she thought. And her initial plan was destined to fail, and that there's no way to go back to the way things were. And that sets them off into the despair phase of Act 2B. Anyway, I think that just kind of walking through it back and forth a couple times in conversation might really reveal what it is. It sounds ridiculous, but when we're talking about these principles, my favorite thing to consider is Elvis movies, because they were so on the nose that you can see the kind of parts moving. So Elvis would always have some kind of greater goal, some kind of thing like, I'm going to save the orphanage.
Okay.
Right. The orphanage is going under, then I can't pay their bills, whatever. All these kids. So I'm going to win the race. and get the money and then save the orphanage. So this very simple kind of goal that he has when he enters Act 2 is the race. And that's the meat of Act 2 is all about that. And when you figure out what that thing is, then the structure is going to kind of get laid out at your feet as well. Like, you're going to get a lot more information about exactly what her character arc looks like and how that informs the structure of the whole story, because it's basically Act 2. You're kind of solving what Act 2 is. Act 1's pretty easy. You set it all up.
Yeah.
Act 3 is not, it's not easy, but I mean, it's easier in that you kind of know that your one job is to resolve everything. But it's like, what do we do with Act 2? What is she chasing through all of Act 2? And what is the promise of the premise kind of thing?
Yeah.
That requires a little more refinement, I think. But if at some point you want to kind of kick that around, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah,
I would love to. Okay, I'll reach out to you.
Okay, that sounds cool. Alrighty, folks. We got to everybody here today. I really enjoy these things. I hope that they become a little more regular. Right now, we're just doing the kind of one a month, but I might do more if I can afford the time, because I really like staying connected with you all and hearing about what you're working on and helping any way that I can, of course. So between now and whenever the next one happens, don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions or observations or anything you kind of want to kind of talk with me about. I'm happy to do DMs, even if we can't get on a video call. Just know that I'm kind of here in the community for you, supporting you, and let me know what I can do for you. I would normally stick on for another half an hour at least, but I've got a doctor's appointment I've got to go to, so I have to jet right now. But I appreciate you all being here, and again, let me know what else I can do for you, okay?
Thanks so much, Jordan.
Okay, have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
And congratulations again.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations. Thank you, Jordan.
Okay, cheers.